Hey, I'm Kimberly with Elixir Mentor. Jacob recently added recruitment services to help companies hire pre-vetted Elixir devs. I help with company outreach, so if you're hiring, I may be reaching out, or you can connect with us anytime at elixirmentor.com.
Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial.io. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. Testing. All right, what's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir Mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we talk about everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts. I just realized I didn't have my mic in front of me. Pioneers in the community to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm joined with Chris McCord, creator of Phoenix Framework and LiveView. I'm pretty excited to have you here. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
I'm excited to be here.
You want to go ahead and, I always tell people to introduce themselves, but I feel like you don't really have to do that.
I mean, I can, yeah. I mean, you did a pretty good job already. Yeah, so I made a web framework and Elixir called Phoenix. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably have heard of it. I wrote the book on metaprogramming Elixir as well about 10 years ago. It's actually remarkably evergreen. I think there's other than some warnings on parentheses, it's still a good source. But yeah, other than that, I've spent my programming career building everything from PHP to Ruby on Rails to now Elixir. It's been on this wild open source ride, so happy to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I recommend metaprogramming to everyone, and it's still it's one of the hardest books for me to completely wrap my mind around. And as I'm reading it, your examples and the way you write, I was like, oh, this is so easy. I've got this. And then when I go and try to write my own macros or whatever I'm doing, it's hard.
Stuff goes sideways. It's easier than other languages. So
true.
Coming from Ruby, Ruby's metaprogramming is basically evaling strings of code. And Ruby's known as a very monkey patch friendly language. So giving some structure to the metaprogramming is, I think, was something very novel for me, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think it's I don't know, it's difficult for that part of my brain to function.
Yeah, it's at what point the code's expanding is confusing. And it's funny because when I first added channels, I was working on Phoenix. I added channels as the first feature, and I don't even remember what I was doing, but basically during compile time, it was like starting a web server, for whatever macro expansion I was doing at the time. It was booting the server at compile time. So yeah, you can definitely, especially as you're diving into things, get yourself into trouble. I was like,
yeah, exactly.
We shouldn't be opening WebSocket connections with a mixed compile. But yeah.
Yeah. It was right before we went live. We were kind of talking about both being from the Midwest and how next year's Elixir Conf is going to be in Chicago. So that's pretty exciting. And
that should be a good time.
I'm going to try to make my first Elixir conference because I originally was supposed to go to Lisbon, got sick and missed it.
Oh, Lisbon was great too. Yeah, where have you been?
I know. I keep getting sick during all these events, and I was just sick last week, and that sucked. But one of these days, I will meet people outside of the internet realm, because I feel like I know so many people from doing this podcast, but then I haven't met anyone in actual real life.
It's fun. It's funny too, because I met people in ElixirConf a couple weeks ago, and I had sworn I had met them in person before, because they came up and introduced themselves. They're like, oh, it's great to see you in person. I was like, no, we chatted, right? And it's just totally online, right? Their avatars become the person. So then I don't remember if I've interacted only virtually or not. So it is fun to see people in person.
It's crazy because I've been in the software world for 10 years, but before that it was manufacturing. So everyone you work with, you're always physically with. And then the software world hits, and I worked with a guy for over 6 years just over the internet, and I've already felt like I met him. And then like we stopped working together for a few years, and I just literally met him in real life like a year and a half ago. And it's just kind of wild. You felt like you
Yeah.
already know these people. But let's I want to kind of go back in time, and then I think we have like a lot of exciting stuff like going off of like your ElixirConf keynote this year. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that's been happening. I want to kind of touch on like what originally got your attention to like Elixir, and what made you kind of shift your focus with Phoenix and focusing in the Elixir ecospace, or yeah, ecospace.
Yeah. So yeah, originally, so like my programming career came through like I think lower level languages. I shouldn't say career. I wasn't getting paid to write C, but I learned through like it's like TI-83 basic, and I played with like assembly for the TI calculator, and then I learned C, C++, and then Java. And this is all to say that when I found PHP, it was incredible because I could just be like dollar variable, right? And then like I had a variable. There was nothing to like type. And then for a web page, you just write the code or the markup. So it was this really great web experience, or really just to build anything for people to use. So software that's easy to build and have people use was web programming. So I got into PHP, built a company on that, and then found Ruby, which is like an actually really great web programming language. So I got into Ruby, and I did that professionally for 5 or 6 years consulting. And this was like, I'm going to say 2010 or so, or when did I get into Elixir? What years? I don't know. I'm an old man now. So like, what years, anyway, Elixir's been around for 14 years. So however long.
Think so.
2011. So around 2011, a lot of clients that we had at the consultancy I worked at would have these real-time application needs. And like just one example, and it may have gotten better in Ruby since then, but like one of our applications fetched a bunch of requests to like different social providers to give you like a ranking among your peers. So I had to make a request to like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all the social platforms. And each of those was a separate like whole Rails process. So a separate thread running you the whole Rails app in memory to make one HTTP request. So if you think just to like refresh this list of stats was 5 separate entire VMs with like 300 megabytes of memory, the whole app booted to make one HTTP request. And that's how we did concurrency. So we were having to scale up and then getting like the messages back to the client as the API request completed. We had to like do push notifications. We didn't do push notifications. We had to do a polling. So it was like just to have this thing update and get the results was like all this polling, and it got very kludgy. And that was just like one example that comes to mind on like, I was thinking that like this programming model for like the modern web of real-time events just isn't going to work in Ruby. And I started looking around and found Erlang, and I actually looked at Rust and Go first. Those didn't click for me for the same reason. I think C and C++ and Java didn't. Just wanted it to be simple, put text on a web page. So I found Erlang, and it was like this amazing story of scale and efficiency, and they had been doing like WebSockets for years before like anyone else was doing them. So I looked at it and had just remembered that Jose Valim, the creator of Elixir, was very prolific in the Ruby and Rails community. So then I was like, well, Elixir runs on the Erlang VM, and that was kind of my entry into like maybe I should look at Elixir. So I love what I saw, but I just needed this web framework to start writing my client web applications in. So I started writing one. So that was the genesis. That fits in one tweet, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it has to have been like kind of a wild story. Like when you first started laying out Phoenix, what did that even look like for you? What was your like original goal? Was it like having LiveView, or was it?
So LiveView was a very roundabout goal. So I left out the part of the Rails story was I did try to make a real-time web library on top of Rails because all of this manual glue back and forth for this just updating real-time values was ridiculous. So I wrote a library called Sync, which allowed you to do real-time Rails partials. If folks are familiar with Rails partials, like you take a template and just render like pass the data to it, and renders just that part. So this looks remarkably similar to like turbo frames or whatever they call it now in Rails that they did years later, but it allowed you to change it one line of code from like render partial to sync partial, and that would re-render that template on the server when that data changed, and then that place in the DOM would automatically get updated. So it was kind of like the similar idea of like the server reacting to changes and then pushing that out via WebSockets to clients. But to make that work was like I had to run an event loop in Ruby using Event Machine. You had to run Fay, which was like a WebSocket server on next to your Rails server. So it was like running a separate process. The Event Machine was like an event loop in Ruby, like JavaScript's concurrency model, but anything in Event Machine has to be Event Machine based code, so like active record. So basically all the Rails Ruby code you used to write isn't like Event Machine based. So it's like this kludgy workaround, and the Event Machine thread would die. So I had to like funky patch Event Machine to like every time we called into it, like we have to check its OS thread to see if it's dead and like restart the thread. So just like this insane stuff to make it work, but it did work. It just wasn't going to work really well. So that's still out there. There's actually a video. I think the very first like open source video I made on Sync is still in the repo, and I demo it. And, it was pretty cool. So this server rendered real-time app thing was the genesis before I got into Phoenix. It was like months before. But when I got into Phoenix, I wanted to do the real-time stuff, but I needed like a building layer. So Phoenix Channels was the first feature of Phoenix. Before you could render HTML on a web page, you could do WebSockets, and that was inspired by like Socket.io. So I wanted like trivial bidirectional communication, and Phoenix Channels was the very first feature. So you could like you could route a request to a controller, but you would have to just like send REST content type HTML in a string. But there was no like you rendering layer for HTML at the beginning. It was just channels. So that was the starting point.
That's awesome. And then I guess so like your end goal was always web. You kind of were you said you weren't really a web developer, were you? Or were you?
By the time I got into Phoenix, I was. So like I started, writing games on the calculator in TI Basic, and then like that was super slow. So I like started doing assembly just to make like a fast like tennis game on the calculator. And then, jumping into C from that which I'm a terrible C developer. Like I haven't done C in years, but at the time, it was like, oh, this is higher level, right? This is great. The assembly, all I remember is like, I would look at source code and try to like think how it worked, like reverse engineer. Like I would see like a call directive and a call Z, and I realized like that was like a if or else block. Anyway, so it was like coming into C was like, this is amazing. Struct, if, else, this is incredible. But I naturally, I think, progressed towards web because I found PHP, and like I said, it was just the simplest way to build software and like get that into people's hands. So I ended up building like a PHP website, turned into a company, and I did that for about 10 years. And that's when I transferred to Ruby and doing professional consulting.
Nice. Okay.
So I've been in web for 20, I don't know, what is it? Since 2003, I have been a web developer.
Gotcha.
Over 20 years. Yeah, look at that.
That's wild. Yeah.
Decades.
I've always struggled with web front end. And I used to be just an iOS developer. That's kind of where I got started. So I was just, storyboard, like click and dragging things. And it made a lot more sense than HTML and CSS and all of that. And then a couple of years ago, I started this YouTube channel, and I originally I was like, no, I called it backend stuff. I was like, I'm just going to build like API, like REST APIs and things like that. And then as my subscriber base raised up, they're like, you need to do Phoenix and Phoenix LiveView. And so LiveView is kind of the first time I started actually trying to learn a web framework for front end development. And
awesome. I did not know this backstory. That's cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of my only front end. I mean, like I can hack together things, but I will say LLMs have been my saving grace to be a pretty decent front end web developer.
People don't realize, they say like, juniors aren't going to be able to learn anything, but like in 2003, like actually I gotta go check this out. There was a site, I don't know what it points to now. Let's see. It's not alive anymore. It's nothing nefarious. DaveSite.com was where I learned HTML, and like
Oh, funny.
in the early 2000s, and like so that back then it was like this guy wrote an HTML tutorial, right? It was just like, oh, here's how you do HTML. And people don't realize, like, at the time, like, just doing like rounded corners required you to like slice a design and like put a little corner.
Oh, it's horrible.
Take the Photoshop file, put the corner here, put the corner here, and that's how we did like everything. And I didn't know CSS other than stumbling my way through. I still don't. But like, when things weren't working properly, I would add like a float left to it, and it would work. So it's like the amount of hours that I've spent over my life, just fiddling with bits that would have been solved in like 10 seconds with an LLM is incredible. So yeah, I don't buy the learning comment because I think it would have been an amazing capability for me starting out to like gap fill all of these things.
I agree with you, and then like I disagree all in like the same space. Only like I like some of the best learning opportunities I've had have been incredibly painful. And
that is true.
Maybe removing that friction, like as long as you're willing to like actually learn from the LLM like response and read the code and understand it, I think you can maybe have the same thing. But it's just, I don't know, it's different. I'm not.
Yeah. So yeah, if I add some nuance to that, I think what I've said is the folks that would have gone on, the beginners that would have gone on to become amazing programmers are just going to have that gap shortened.
Yeah.
And
fair.
the folks that would have gone on to be copy pasta Stack Overflow bad programmers now can take it to them, make it a lot longer, and get other team members into a lot of trouble, right?
Now they can
so that is true.
They can successfully launch an app and collect people's private information that gets leaked.
Yeah, but they could always do that. So it's like I do think it amplifies folks that are in that like that in between. But I think in general, people have always. I mean, software's always been terrible. I've consulted for a dozen years. Like everything's a ball of mud. So it's not like we were sitting on this, perfect empire of crafted software. That is
true. That's true.
But I think in general, yeah, beginners that are bright individuals and would have gone on to become great programmers are just going to be able to get there that much faster. Because like I said, like in spite of all these like learning stumbling blocks, I was able to create this company in 2003, not knowing what I was doing. Just setting up like SSL all the time. Like, I mean, there's so many things where like, I have no idea how I solved these things at the time, but like if I would have shortened that and shipped something, and I still shipped absolutely terrible code, right? Like my PHP file was like, it was just one index PHP, and it was like the form posts were via GET requests. It was probably insecure, right? So it's like, not that, I wasn't shipping secure code in any case. So, but I do agree with you. Like it's not all unicorns and rainbows. There's definitely some repercussions, but I think the bright folks are just going to be that much better.
But then the super awesome part is look how much you can build with it if you know how to use your tools.
It's ridiculous. Like I'm I sound like a evangelist, but like just every day, like I just I tweeted out that like I'm back in like Tmux and NeoVim, and I wanted to be able to like click my stack trace line test fails or whatever file line and have my NVim open to there like any other IDE would do. And I just asked Claude how to do it, right? And it told me how to. I mean, it took like a back and forth because it wasn't working right, but I figured it out through like various hacks. It knew some iterm2 setting for on click to like call a shell command, and then it wrote that shell command, but it tried to invoke Tmux, but Tmux is not in that bash session because it's a separate bash session. So it wrote like a Apple script that like found the running foreground iterm window and then wrote text in it. In any case, I got this guy that did exactly what I wanted, and like multiple people on Twitter were like, "Oh my God, this is what I wanted for years," right? And it's like all I did was ask the magic black box for it, right? So for folks that know what they're doing and kind of like can keep on, like, you know enough, you know what you don't know, and you know what you know. So it's like you can steer things properly and also know when they go off the rails. And I think other than this, like, tooling scenario that isn't super important, the same thing applies to code, where it's like knowing where things are going off the rails is critical, and then also knowing where to like kind of put your finger on the scale and be like, oh no, actually there's a race condition here. lets you be 10 times as fast. So
Yeah.
it is this amazing experience, but you can also be 10 times as fast, and
Yeah.
it's horrible. So this is the way
I
it
mean,
goes. This is the trade-off.
I really enjoy debugging and like, giving it the stack trace and letting it go. And then it usually finds weird edge cases in my code. And, 9 times out of 10, it gives me a good fix.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And then the counterpoint to that, I was asking in the private Phoenix chat that we have. I was like, has anyone seen this weird issue? I was like, it's got to be a bug in like OTP or Elixir. So there was a gen server. I have a gen server behavior that proxies to a user space module, like LiveView is similar. This is something in a product, and I was getting a handle info message was leaking to the module that implements the behavior with a gen continue message. So like, you can do a handle continue in a gen server, but somehow gen continue was landing in my module's handle info. And I was like, Erlang should not ever be sending, the way gen server or handle call, handle cast, and gen continue, those basically send internal messages with like $gen underscore call, $gen. It's all message sending, right? It's all doing send internally. OTP is just code doing what you would expect on top of sends and receives and references and monitors. But in any case, I went down the path as this experienced developer of like, this must be a bug, right? It's like I'm implementing this behavior, I'm forwarding handle call, handle info, and my handle info is getting the gen continue and forwarding it on, but my handle anyway. So I was like, this is impossible. It's got to be a bug. And then the moment I rubber ducked it to the Phoenix channel, I was like, wait, let me actually make sure that like, let me do a code base search for like gen continue. Anyway, Cloud Code had written one of my test cases. I hadn't committed this yet, but I was in the middle of debugging this failure, and literally in the test it was trying to test handle continue, and it was trying to force test it by like just doing a send. So literally in the code was just send gen continue $, trying to like do the internal Erlang thing.
Yeah.
So in any case, like you can't just. It was one of these cases where you're like, this is really dumb. Like, I was kind of caught in this mindset of, I verify typically everything that's going on. But in this case, I saw the stack trace, and I immediately went down this path of like, oh, well, it must, this has to be something internal, right? So it almost is worse that I knew more, right?
Because you go to the most complicated problem first.
Yeah, if you saw gen continue and you didn't know about the internals of OTP gen server, you'd be like, well, who's sending that message anyway? So just a fun anecdote. And I told Claude that like, it was literally just a message send that it did. It did like a 3 facepalm emojis.
That's funny.
Anyway, it's just like, you got to watch it. I mean, not everything's perfect, but you have to be aware of what's going on. And that's one case where like a beginner would have just been probably completely unaware of what was happening.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, they probably wouldn't even realize what was happening, right? And I think that's a good example too, because I was kind of guilty of this. I would kind of just like scan, like I would let it write a unit test or whatever and like quickly scan it. But you have to make sure your test coverage is actually creating
LLMs
good tests.
Yeah, they write a lot, pretty much all my tests. So.
Right, they write all mine too. But if you're not,
I'm a regrettable tester. I've always been.
Me too. Which is like saving grace.
I have to do it, but I don't enjoy it.
I know. I agree, but like every once in a while, it will just fix your code to pass a bad test. Like, you know what I mean? Yep. And it won't fix it properly. It'll just fix it to fix the test.
Yeah, I haven't. My biggest complaint with Cloud Code is really like it will be lazy and give up too soon. It will be like we've spent too long on getting this test try to fix. Let me move on to some other ones. And it's like, no, we're still working on this one. But it typically doesn't. I haven't advocated too many cases where it's like just remove features to get it to pass, but it does dumb stuff for sure. You gotta be careful with the YOLO mode, but my favorite thing is like, it was like dangerously accept permissions. But my favorite thing is like, I did it last night. I went to bed, I sent Claude off on with dangerously accept permissions, and I just sent it off on testing the new feature that I implemented. And I was just like, test the interface, and I went to bed. So woke up to a bunch of stuff that I then use that as a starting point. But that's pretty much my daily workflow now. Because why not, right? It's like I can throw that away, right? It's not that I'm going to just git push force, whatever it produced, but it's a starting point for me coming in when I get back to work.
So dangerously accepting permission flag, it'll never prompt. It'll just go and has full write access.
All edits, full send, all bash commands.
I'm not that brave. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but maybe if you had access to a sandbox environment that you could treat like it's local, I may know of something, but no, I can run it in this. I run it in a sandbox place, and
okay.
I mean, it has access to the code base and my Git, but not my system.
Okay, yeah, that would be a lot safer. So Phoenix .1.8 just released a couple weeks now? A couple weeks ago?
It's been a couple months.
Yeah. Okay. And you kind of introduced like Agents.md and a lot of cool little things that kind of help integrate LLMs and agents with it. I feel like Elixir seems to be moving relatively quickly in adopting the AI movement. And I think it's pretty cool to see like how fast like Tidewave's been improving, and then like Phoenix.now and like the Tidewave LiveView and like all these things. And then like Phoenix.new, we can talk about that because that's really cool too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like my LixirConf talk was basically about how like we are an amazing platform for like new developers to come in and have like AI assisted dev to like learn all these weird concepts, right? It's like you're coming into Elixir, pretty much everything's going to be foreign. It's probably your first functional language, and not only is it like a functional language, which in of itself is tough for folks to come in and wrap their mind around. Then you have like this concurrency model that's crazy. You have these OTP behaviors. Like there's just a lot of stuff to load into your head. And you have this, like I call it like the frustration gap of learning. So and it turns out LLMs are amazing at writing Elixir code. So we have this, we're in this opportunity where we're like, it's amazing to have LLM assisted development in Elixir, and we actually have this like accidentally purpose-built platform for writing AI agents. Where we find basically like the problems Erlang solved in the 80s, like every new technological shift, they ended up solving this telephone thing, and then now it's like, oh, multi-core, boom, solve. It's like, oh, the internet, boom, solve. Real-time messaging, boom, solve. And now AI agents, like, boom, it's like all these primitives just map themselves to the modern problems.
It's pretty wild. They all
I mean, it's just been time and time again.
You know?
Yeah, it's crazy. So they nailed these primitives. So I think we are in this space where like this is our time to own that space, and things have moved quickly because I got into at the end of 2024. That's when I started working on Phoenix new product, and that's where like it was clear to me. Like I was a copy paste ChatGPT assisted developer, right? I was like, oh yeah, LLMs are helpful. Write this module for me. Write this JavaScript, copy paste. It works. But then at the end of 2024, it became clear that like the whole agent or agentic space, the word agentic I hate, but because it makes it sound too fancy, but like agents became a thing where if you just put these chats in a loop and let them run code or run things with side effects call into your code, and they became these really capable agents that could write code for you, solve problems, do basically whatever you wanted by making the next decision on the thing to do. And so it became clear that we had this inflection point. To me, late last year, other folks like Cursor had seen this much earlier. But that's when I started working on the Phoenix new product at Fly, and we shipped that in about 5 months from start to finish, again, because I had AI assisted help with LLMs. And that gives people, like a full in-browser. You can have no Elixir installed. You can go to Phoenix.new and ask for an app, and it's going to write you a Phoenix app that can do chats or basically whatever you want that isn't unreasonable. Like we had to write like multiplayer Uno. It can do Tetris. It can do interesting things using like the primitives of Phoenix LiveView and Erlang. So like you can get this like distributed real-time app out of the box, and not know how Elixir or Phoenix works.
That's pretty cool. I have not had a chance to play with Phoenix.new. I need to set some time aside to do it.
Yeah, I'll have to, I can hook you up. But for folks that there's that side of things where like the editor, yeah, it gives you like VS Code in the browser, but the editor is almost like eye candy for the developer right now on the Phoenix.new product, because like for what you can code and you could use that as your full IDE, but it's mostly like if the editor wasn't there, everything would still work because the agent's just writing the code and you're just watching it. And in fact, it can run asynchronously, so like the editor literally is just eye candy if you're not using it. But at the same time, Jose, this is all on his radar as well. So he took a different direction with Tidewave. It was like, how can we bring like LLM assisted development like to like the local developer space, right? Like everyone at the time was either building these like lovable platforms with Phoenix.new, it's in browser. Cloud Code, I think, was launched after Jose had started Tidewave. But in any case, like the CLI programming agents came out, but then that's just running in the CLI. And then like MCP started to become a thing. So Jose's insight was we could have web frameworks basically embed an MCP server inside of them if they have a good concurrency model. So like Phoenix could just run Tidewave MCP inside itself. And it turns out like this is a Herculean effort in other platforms. Like trying to get like Django to run a separate HTTP server inside of a Django app is like pretty much impossible. Which is just interesting to think about. That's just a sidebar. Like just running an MCP server inside your app that's running is an achievement for other platforms. Just I want folks to keep that in mind. But yeah, so they're targeting Rails as well, and Tidewave is kind of taking the other direction on. It gives the LLM runtime intelligence about your app. So instead of just having this copy paste flow, you have like a chat app inside your running web server, and it has access to the running state, running memory, and it's able to close the loop on like checking the logs and what you want. So it's a pretty great dev experience there on that side. So we're trying to kind of tackle this from all directions. And then the Phoenix 1.8 release then is for the bring your own agent game, right? So like Phoenix.new is a product, Tidewave Web is a product, but Tidewave MCP server is open source that you can just drop in and your Cloud or Codex can talk to that MCP server. But the Phoenix 1.8 effort was basically me extracting all the gap filling and lessons learned and from all the tokens I burned on Phoenix.new into everyone's system prompt. So Phoenix 1.8 ships an AGENTS.md text file, and that's basically everything other than like our specific tools from the Phoenix.new product that made frontier LLMs work well. So it's just all gap filling that's required outside of the world knowledge of GPT-5.
Which is wild because it's really just like correction prompts, just to...
That's all it is, yeah. So that's what I tell people, like it's, we have comprehensive docs, those are the docs, right? So it's like, it's just, the goal is, until context windows become infinite, the goal is like the only, that was derived from me just trying to build Phoenix apps and seeing where it sucked. And just adding that to the system prompt or steering it in the right way with the right trial and error. And so now everyone can have that experience from all those tokens that I've earned on the Phoenix.new product just in their app. So Cloud Code or Codex CLI or Gemini CLI can take those rules and pick them up automatically. And now you can have the same great Elixir coding experience regardless of your tool. So that's what I showed at ElixirConf, where I sent Cloud Code locally off on a vibe coding thing with the dangerously accept permissions, and just let it run during my talk. And then I generated a Slack clone with multi-rooms using Gen servers to track presence and to do all kinds of stuff. And it just worked at the end of the talk.
That's pretty cool.
Used it. And yeah, so at all ends of the stack, we've got like the Phoenix.new product. That's a great entry for folks coming in the door that like don't even have Elixir installed, or they want to run an async agent on their laptop.
And that's all browser based. Like you're doing
fully browser. You can clone code off of it, but you can't like SSH into it currently. And then Tidewave is like great for your day-to-day dev experience. You can just like get like a /Tidewave, localhost /Tidewave, and you have an interface that you can use to edit your LiveView or whatever you're doing. And then you want to be like I said in my talk, if you're a software artisan craftsmen running, tmux or cloud code, do you like CLI tools? Now we have a great experience there as well. So it's not just about, folks. I think there was some stuff on Blue Sky, like hating on Jose and myself for like being into AI, but it's not like we were both writing a paid product, but this Tidewave MCP is open source, so it's like boom immediately, free gift to the community, and then the system prompt from Phoenix.new is now just included in everyone's app. So I think we have this great story across the board on like the vibe code, like Lovables of the world, but now in Phoenix you've got Tidewave for your developers, just like
it's always surprising where the hate comes from.
Well, people love to hate. That's
I know
you're always gonna have haters. That's how you've made it. But but the AI space has been very contentious, and that's been new to me. Like everything I've worked on prior to this, people like there's always been hate. Like people just love to hate on stuff, but I've never had this like viscerally negative. Like people are just mad that I'm saying the word AI. Like weird, just like we're in this weird time. Like people there's ethical quandaries about this space, but like just people hearing the word LLM or AI out of my mouth, that they're like very mad. I've been like called a shill or like,
but like also
to like cryptocurrency bro. It's like, listen, like I'm like I have this lived experience of like this incredible capability increase that I've had. And I'm excited that Elixir is like incredibly well positioned for this space. So like I've always just worked on things I'm excited about. And usually folks, are just like, if they're not into it, they let us do what we want. But now they're like, no, they're mad and they want to tell you about it.
The thing is, like, I was definitely like a slow adopter of the LLM into my like workflow. Like I used it, but like more like, write this function at like a really small, I just wanted it to sort something or do some sort of algorithm for me. I would just have it solve like one specific problem. And I was slow because I wasn't happy with how they worked. So it was like I was very slow at adopting it into my workflow. But then the whole like agentic thing came out and things just started working a lot better. But like it's funny that you get hate for jumping on like the new blockchain or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get on a crypto. But basically, I have never. If the crypto space disappeared today, nothing of value would be lost. Value being an abstract is my opinion. So I've like it. So it's actually incredibly insulting to me. It's like one of the worst things someone could say to me is equating me to that space. But there is a lot of hype here, but it's like there's like demonstrable value. It's like,
right. I was going to say that like,
every day I feel like I'm in like God tier, right? Like like that, just anything I'm doing. It's just like every day is like accomplishing these tasks that would have taken me a full day. I do in like 10 minutes.
Well, what's really nice is like you can go and get a coffee and you're still having code written and you're back at your desk and then you kind of do some code review.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's going to be the future. It's like people don't like to hear that, but I do think that like I don't know where this ends, but like if we say let's have the premise that we plateau from here on out. Let's say Claude 4, Opus 4.1 is as good as it gets, never gets better. I still think it fundamentally changes the landscape where we're running these things and they're writing code for us when we're not there. Like we're already there.
If anything,
it's as a matter as like how much fixing and hand-holding and fiddling with what they do are we going to be involved with is the question. But even if it doesn't get any better from here, like I said, I go to bed and more often than not, my nights are like I send Cloud Code up on something. So it's like I'm already living this experience where I'm getting this value when I'm not around. And since it's running remotely, I actually just close my laptop. So I could close my laptop and drive to the coffee shop and open it back up and see what it did, right? So that's my future. I'm living the future right now.
Mine is my 10-foot walk to my coffee machine.
But even that's nice. I mean, you think like this is like we have such a privileged life as programmers, but it's like really usually do. Like you run mixed tests and like or whatever, like you run something and it takes a while, right? So you're like, well, our previous workflow, right? Our optimized workflow, because we love to optimize, used to be like I'll run that long running task and I'll go get some coffee, right? That way I'm optimizing. But then like after it runs, maybe there was an error. Why wouldn't it try to fix the error while you weren't there, right? So
Right,
anyway, there's just
exactly.
like,
Well,
it's silly
I
not to be leaning on these things, even if you want to be the biggest skeptic in the world and say they're trash because they're stochastic parrots. Like, still, like, if I could run mixed tests, and then we tab away, you go back on Slack, let it run. If I could just have something try to fix the obvious, simple thing, like, why wouldn't I do that?
It's really
I
not
don't know.
great for our ADHD problems though, but it is nice.
Oh no, I mean it's not, but that's a separate problem. I mean, I think it's
So
always.
Adway has a pretty good point. He's like, there's a concern that new devs simply won't be able to code without it, just like most devs today can't code without a language server, which, it's kind of
I
true.
mean, it could be true, but that is probably going to be true of most folks. I mean, I think you could flip that around and say if you didn't have an internet connection prior to
That's
LLM,
true.
you probably weren't getting too much done, right? Like the Tailwind docs opening up, right? I mean, just all Stack Overflow. So it's more true now because it's such a crutch to just have if the magical oracle is doing work for you as your status quo and you just review, well, if you can't do the work, then you're not going to be able to review. So I agree with that, but I also think that we were already well past developers in a vacuum without internet being capable. Just because there's just so much, right?
Well,
Elixir's documentation is built in at least, but many communities, like coming from Rails, maybe it changed with Ruby. Like the documentation existed maybe in the project, but like you would go to like a website, right? It wasn't co-located. Like Elixir's documentation being co-located in the code and extractable is like a novel feature. I don't know if they borrowed it from another language, but like people forget that like everything was just like on a docs website, or there was a Mac app that like downloaded the docs and then like let you search them. That a lot of people use in the Ruby community. So there's like all this stuff that we probably were already there. And I think
we're not living in
back to,
physical paper books anymore where everything stays the same for 10
yeah.
years.
And if you go back to my early 2000s learning programming, so I was writing PHP on Windows 98 in Notepad exe because I didn't know what an IDE was, right? Like, I'm sure there was something that supported syntax highlighting of PHP back then, but like Notepad exe, and then whatever my Apache install that I did, I don't remember. Whatever I did, like any PHP error would just have a blank page. It wouldn't show the stack trace, right? Because like production, you don't want to. So like all my days, hours were spent like missing semicolon on a for comprehend or for loop, and it would just be a blank page, and I would have to go through Notepad, note to text highlighting.
Dude.
So like I lived this experience, but like in spite of that, you stumble through, and to your point, maybe that helped me debug better. I didn't have an LSP just tell me to be able to point to the line or whatever, but I don't think that I got better because I was able to scour unstyled PHP. You know what I mean?
We just wasted so much time,
Right. There's a balance in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think that society will depend on these things, and no one will be able to get their job done without them.
Well, and like
so I agree with that, but just because they're so capable, it's like for the same reason if you gave an accountant, if you took Excel away from them,
or a calculator, or
Or I was gonna say calculator,
tools.
but I'm like they're also not like
they're not even using calculators,
right? They're using the calculator in the program. So I think it's a similar thing. Like these will become essential tools everywhere. We'll be screwed without them. But that's the way it goes. We're also we'd be screwed without compilers, and I don't know. It's just another tool. But
we're getting to that point too with like past systems like Fly.io, for example. Like I hack my way through my DevOps. I'm not going to brag that I know what I'm doing. I get it working. I think it's secure, and that's my DevOps, But then you actually right. And then you actually have these platforms now that make it, you pretty much just give it your GitHub link, right? And then you can now deploy things and scale things, and everything's just secure and works.
Yep. Yeah, and it goes both ways too. I mean, obviously, like I think we have a good platform at Fly, but LLMs, and this is where you get in the this is probably a cautionary tale somehow, but like they are remarkably good about cutting through all of the ridiculous boilerplate it takes to get like AWS stuff set up. So like I do think, again, for folks that are doing what you're doing, like setting up GCP or AWS, it's amazing to like gap fill all of the ridiculous screens and IAM policies that you would have to do. Because anytime I sign into any of these things, I'm like, I don't even know how I get to the page that I need to
You
get
forget
to.
where everything is, even if you're like
just
all
sidebar.
the time.
So yeah, Phoenix.new, the product, is using Google Vertex to talk to Anthropic API. So they host Claude. And I could not get the request working. And you go to Google Vertex and you for your account, that you have to have like a billing account set up, so you have to go do that, and then you click enable model, and it's like model enabled. And so I did that, and I still would get like rate limit on every. I could send 0 requests, and I clicked through. I spent like 2 hours on googling it, going through like Google's Vertex thing. Finally, I asked ChatGPT, how the heck do I, what do I do? And it's like, there's actually a quotas page for your billing org that has thousands of quota entries across all like GCP products. And buried in there, you have to do like freeform search for like, it only, enabling the model only enables it, but this quota defaults to 0. Anyway, I found this out through an LLM. So this is all to say that these things are amazing for ops stuff, but I think they can get you into trouble for the same way as code, where you're just like, how do I do this? Now, how do I make this secure? And you think you're secure. But that's probably better than what I was doing in the early 2000s, which was just like running whatever flavor of Linux that my host happened to have, right? And then like FTPing PHP files up to it. Like I didn't have any IP table stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. So I think we're actually in a much better spot security wise, but it goes back to like, they will only help you so much.
Dude, the first website I tried to build, it's just a bunch of images pretty much. My nav bar was stolen and refactored from Stack Overflow, and it was bad. And I think I used Dreamweaver and then FTP'd to my server.
Oh, Dreamweaver was like the WYSIWYG for websites. That was kind of a big deal.
But I didn't use it right, Okay.
I think I never wanted to pay for the license, but I've lived that life almost.
I think I pirated the license, but you can't really pirate software anymore,
Yeah.
But that was a different time for sure. Old coder, AI is going to be as good as the developer's ability to clearly prompt and the ability to recognize bad code. I agree. Beginners will go through the same process, becoming a good developer or a bad developer, just faster, which I think I agree. I think you're just going to...
That's basically, my thesis on that. And I think that, it's like the gatekeeping stuff, like beginners will figure it out. I think we do have a outsized advantage as if you're an experienced developer, where the things to ask, right? And you can gap fill, but you also
that'll be the hard part, being a new junior. But you're going to learn how to ask.
But you have this oracle, and again, people say don't trust it, but you have this oracle that it's actually, the world knowledge is vast, and they're great at they do hallucinate, but you can just ask it tell me about XYZ, right? And it's going to tell you about it. I just literally, I always forget what the handle continue. I mentioned handle continue earlier. I forget what I rarely use handle continue, and Erlang is relatively new. I always forget the signature, it's a tuple. Anyway, so I asked Claude, give me a basic handle continue example, which is and that's how I just literally wrote a feature today, which led to that bug that we saw. But it's for anything like that, where the word, but you don't know how it works. If you're a bright individual, what you would typically do previously is go scour Google, right? Spend the time asking a forum. Now you can just ask the biggest, dumbest question, and you'll likely get an insightful answer.
Yeah, and because back in the day, you're hoping there's a good Stack Overflow answer or a random blog post that solves your problem.
That's it. Yeah. And you flail around. So I think that we do have this amazing capability, and the people that are just gonna trust and not verify are gonna be more easily, I think, to hide in the shadows and then cause horrible things. But every other day there's a breach, so everywhere. So the other thing I'll say is I do think if you ask LLMs to do, I have to be careful how I phrase this. I think LLMs can actually be amazing at doing security audits. And when I say amazing, I mean we're not just going to trust them for that purpose. But I also think there's another side where, if you're a bright individual, you can ask the LLM to audit your code. or out of the code that you've worked on with it. And I think you will actually gain reasonable insights from that. Not that it's going to be perfect, but I think it will actually do a reasonable job at like finding things or telling you where to look, identifying things to look out for. And again, this all feeds back into itself, where folks don't know. Again, back in my days of PHP doing GET requests on posts, I was opening like MySQL connections like inside the template everywhere. It would have been able to tell me like, here's some issues with that. Here's what CSRF is. Here's how to make sure you don't get blown by it.
I'm really excited. I'm having Michael Lubis on. I had to reschedule.
Oh, awesome.
He'll be on Wednesday, but I'm curious to get his whole viewpoint.
I actually want to. I've been meaning to talk with him about it too. So yeah, Michael's great. Praxil is awesome. I had chatted with him, I think in Lisbon actually. So
nice.
In Lisbon, we had, this was 2023, so before LLMs being everything. I just had a lot of good conversations with him in general about Elixir and security. So I'm curious to see his thoughts too, because I think tools like Praxil will be more and more important for the same reason that like devs are not infallible, LLMs are not infallible. I think it would be
like I kind of see Praxil being that security like audit, like that leverages LLMs in its favor. Like it's that expert,
Yeah, he could have. I mean, there could be a Praxil agent that just like distills Michael's brain trust of things to highlight. And that would make sense to me. But I think it cuts both ways. I think that these things will produce insecure code, but they will also be great at finding insecure code. And it's tricky too, because developers, like, when we first start out writing, we don't have all the requirements in our head. We don't have like all the authorization rules. Like the Phoenix generators, we have scopes now at least. So prior to scopes, they generated wide open code, right? So there's a tale of all this time where folks would run a scaffolding command like Rails G scaffold or a Phoenix scaffold, and they would just never authorize a controller, and like bam, security hole. So you can't then point it at the Phoenix generator and say, oh, you led the folks down the wrong path because they didn't know. This is just things that happen, right? People start with some kind of code generator, and even experienced developers may just not spot the thing or know to test the thing. So I think that, again, it only highlights these same problems that have always existed.
Right. Well, and like to your point,
to ship some, like it's going to be easier for folks to get things working. Whereas before, the folks that wouldn't know enough wouldn't be able to get to the point to try to deploy it abroad. Right now, they're going to actually get to a point where it's like, oh, it all works, and that's a problem. But I think that the trade-offs are going to be worth it. And
and the security
don't even matter here, because this is the reality. It's happening.
Yeah. We still had that problem with people just copying and pasting from Stack Overflow, and then they would just randomly finally get their code to compile and work. It's the same blindness being followed.
It is. And the same comments were like for coding interviews with whiteboard coding. There was innumerable Hacker News threads on like, any programmer is going to have access to the internet and no one's going to be coding in a vacuum. So it's the same comments now on take the LLM away. What are people going to do? It's like, it's the same goalpost just moved.
I used to like context switch a lot more. Like, thankfully, I'm mostly writing Elixir code every day now. So it's like, it's so much easier on my brain. But like when I first started, I was jumping between Swift, Objective-C, JavaScript, TypeScript. I was like in all these worlds, and you don't remember syntax. It's just like, at least like I don't. I remember like one language syntax normally, and then like I'm like, how do I do a for loop again? And you're just always Googling and looking up syntax anyways. So this just like removes that pain.
Yep, and it lets you like if you, again, for an experienced developer, it's very helpful for reading other code in languages you don't know. So it's like, I can ask. I actually had a really good experience. I had an agent port something that we had at Fly from Go into the Go API into Phoenix, and like I better understood the intent of the Go code by having an LLM port it to Elixir than trying to read the code.
Nice. That's interesting.
Because it was
as
like,
long as
Go was just like
right.
Well, here's the we can talk about this for a second, but the amount of the verbosity of Go is outrageous. I'll try to be fair here, in that like people love Go because it's like a simple, but like trying to figure out what a Go function does is like requires like scrolling through multiple pages. and then like that's like a with statement that's like 10 lines in Elixir. So I would go to the Elixir code and be like, oh, that's what that Go code's doing. Like it had like named the functions well, and I did find I found an authorization failure in logic that in the Elixir code, and I was like, aha, see, LLMs are imperfect. They're not good for porting. And I went to the Go code, and it actually perfectly replicated the Go logic and reproduced the
And you found a
security
bug?
issue. Yeah, so it reproduced it, I mean, perfectly,
Yeah.
which is kind of actually fascinating to me. And for the port, I gave it no context other than port this Go code at this GitHub repo.
Oh,
So
wow.
I didn't know like what the code was supposed to do. So it was just like that was the
And you
starting
just
point.
pointed it at a URL too,
Yeah,
like the, oh,
yeah, and
wow.
it
That's
did
pretty
like
good.
so when I mean it wasn't this was like a real API. I'm not going to say it's a massive. It wasn't a massive code base, but like a real internal API at Fly. And it took 2 hours of work after that port for me to have I'm going to say, feature complete. It's not something that I shipped to production to replace the Go API, but like I was able to point a API client at the Phoenix app,
That's pretty
and
impressive.
it
I
worked.
like that.
Right.
That's
So
cool.
I've lived, like I said, I'm not going to say it was perfect, but like from this standpoint, it was a kind of a revelation for me on like it pulled the intent out of the Go code that I would not have been able to get from my Go knowledge, and
Yeah.
it was actually helpful to understand all the requirements by seeing it ported into another language. So it speaks to like, yeah, there's something interesting there that these things are able to do. But this all goes to I could give it any new language. I could have it write that language, like this web tool I'm going to open source. I had it port from JavaScript to Go, so it'd be more portable. And like that's something that like I don't like. I know enough that I can like look at the Go code and say like, yeah, it's downloading um, it's downloading headless Firefox. It's running this command. Like I can read through the code and be reasonably confident it works, right? Because one, it actually works when I run
Hmm.
it, and two, it's like one file. So it's like there is this really big capability increase for folks that like again you know enough to know when things like are obviously wrong and or pass the smell test. And I'm not a Go developer, but I'm going to release this Go library. So anyway,
Nice.
I don't know. Something
I
fascinating there.
think this will be awesome, right? Like people are going to start porting a lot more libraries that are useful. My only concern is people not supporting those libraries once they're published. But I guess
That's true.
it's a
That's always
different.
been I mean, I think we've always had the issue of open source where it's like the maintenance burden is not necessarily on the maintainer. There may be no maintainer. Well, it'd be easier to ship a library, but that doesn't mean it's
Hmm.
going to be good. It also LLMs remove the need for a lot of libraries too. So there's the flip side of um, Rec got AWS SIG v4. So this is built into Rec now, but something at Fly we were using X AWS for their IAM policy stuff, and that's a big library. I mean, it works fine. I have nothing against it, but we were using Rec S3 for everything except this IAM policy. There's all these transitive dependencies of XAWS. So I just asked an LLM, write me the IAM policy using Rec. It was like 22 lines of code
Oh,
doing like,
that's pretty nice.
crypto dot, like, as an experienced developer looking at one, it actually worked when talking to AWS, but like I was able to grok that right and like, yep, looks
Yeah.
good. Now that it's just built into Rec now, but it was like, there's another case where like I could drop a whole library, I could exclude an entire library in that case. And you can do that in all kinds of cases where like I'm not anti-library, but for these small, for the same reason, here's the
For
thought. For the
22
same
lines of
reason,
code, it's silly to have a whole
yes, and for the
dependency,
same
right?
reason, it's trivial for folks to like ship a bunch of open source libraries. Because they're using LLMs, you could literally just have the LLM write these small things for you.
That's true.
Just like
Yeah.
my web tool that I'm releasing, anyone can recreate with Cloud Code if they wanted to. Like that's because that's how I built it.
Yeah.
That's how I built the JavaScript one, and that's how I built the Go one. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
saving folks that that token time basically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. But like, yeah, for something that's 22 lines of code, you don't want to just add dependencies that are just bloat, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Elixir we have a pretty pragmatic approach to dependencies.
We
I mean,
do.
I think like the Node community who have it turns out have had like the worst.
Dude, start a
Um,
new JavaScript anything
well,
project. How many
they've had the
frameworks
worst.
are
What do they call it? supply chain attack, especially because LLMs introduced this stuff. Because transitive dependencies are basically just like an infinite graph of dependencies. And people have like an is-array dependency that's like 2 lines of code. So I think in Elixir, we're pretty pragmatic. Like we're not anti-dependency, but one thing I've been doing software long enough that it's taught me that like every dependency is a liability. And that's a liability potentially for security, but also potentially just like a maintenance burden or something that's going to break where, Elixir 2 or 1, whatever, 20 is released and there's a deprecation or a breaking change. Now I'm dependent on this other library for my code to build. So it's like I view dependencies, I think, probably more severely than others in that like it's an actual internal dialogue where you're like, is this 5 years from now, is this going to bite me, in the ass or not? Instead of just like dropping it in the project. So I think there's a bigger trade-off there for maintainable software that I don't just bring stuff in because it's convenient, especially if it's 20 lines of code.
Right. Yeah, I feel like JavaScript, everyone just uses packages for whatever. Like, oh yeah,
I mean, you have
bring
to.
it in, bring
It's
it
like,
in.
It is what it is, but it's
Yeah.
obviously could cause problems. I like my JavaScript build story is like I vendor everything. Like the Phoenix.new product, it's LiveView, and there's probably 8 JavaScript files and of like source files that are like Phoenix hooks, and then I think Xterm.js is a good example, right? You have a terminal that you get to use, and that's just in an assets vendor directory. I didn't bring in Node to bring in Xterm.js because I can just bring the code in, right? Like I vendor it, it's never going to change. It's just a minified text file. It works as advertised. I don't need any more of that.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I also saw you brought up Jito. I've been talking to Mike Hostetler quite a bit, and I think that's going to be a really cool project to keep an eye on. At least
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
like,
Yeah, so I haven't used it yet, but it's like one of those things that like I was hoping to see in the community. I mean, I think that we have some amazing building blocks, and I think like I talked about Gen server being you can build an agent with a Gen server that fits on one slide, but I think that like the building blocks of like these longer lived things that have multiple tools that you can define. So anyway, Jito is I'm tracking and looks awesome. Folks should check it
yeah,
out.
I did a
See how it
live
goes.
stream with Mike where we got some, Gen servers or, agents spawning in Gen servers. And like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like Mike's driving, like I'm just trying to like stay caught up with this LLM stuff and agents, but it's cool. And yeah, I think Mike is working on some tutorials too for using Jito, so I think that'll help a
Yeah,
lot.
there's a whole website, and I think like the coolest thing for folks to realize with things like Jito is like it's using the same primitives as that Erlang has built on. So like the awesome thing with like so if you use a Jito agent, that thing's just going to be a process. And like how do you call that process? You send it a message. So like that sounds like until you internalize that, like it doesn't like I don't think that clicks for people, but any other community, actually, let me just talk about like what it takes to build an agent, and then I can tie this back in
Perfect.
Jito and the primitive. So if you need an agent, you basically have this recursive loop calling an HTTP request to a chat completion point, either locally on a local model or remotely to Anthropic or OpenAI or whoever. And what you essentially need is like you're re-entering the state of the whole chat. You make this recursive request. It has like a tool call or function call that falls out that calls something in your code, or the user types something and hits enter in their browser. If you're actually just writing a chat based agent. The problem that you need to solve is like the recursive run a for loop that does a HTTP request is easy, but then how do you get the user's request up to that piece of state that is the whole chat history? Probably don't want to have the client send it on every request up to the server. And how do you then like the tokens that are spit out sent to the client? How do you get those back? Once you find that piece of memory that you're using, you can put it all in the database, but reload it on every
You're
request.
just describing supervision right now.
Right. So, but if you actually think through what it takes, like most folks will have to solve this, right? They'll put it in some data store. They put it all in Postgres. That's expensive. You're pulling the entire chat history up every single time someone submits a message or the agent submits a message. That's ridiculous. And then spitting the keys out. How do you route the text that falls out of the LLM as it's like checking out on your web browser, how do you get that back from that piece of concurrent code running somewhere back to the user's browser or mobile app? Like that is a very hard problem to solve. And the way that other communities are going to solve this is going to require frameworks in and of themselves to do the RPC call, to somehow route the requests, right? Maybe it's solved at the ops level, to have sticky sessions. Like there are all these things, and it's going to be very framework specific because no building blocks exist in these ecosystems to go find that piece of state that's there or load it. They have to load it somehow. They have to cache it. Bring Redis in. How do you get it back to the user? Are you using WebSockets? Do you have something using server-side events? Are you pulling? So anyway, all of these things have to be solved. They're going to be solved in different ways, different frameworks, and that means there's going to be breaking changes because there are new interfaces at all these steps. In Elixir, this is already solved for us. So whether you're using a Gen server or you want to go higher level with Jito to solve the real problems of agents, it's just a Gen server call. Like how do you route that user request when I hit enter? You just send it a message. Same way you would do it in any other piece of code. And how do you get it back to the browser? Is it a Phoenix channel client on a native app? You send in a message, right, to the Phoenix channel. Is it a LiveView? You send in a message. So it's like all of these primitives are just going to map perfectly. They're already solved. So you bring in something like Jito, which is a framework, which is a bad word for people, but like it literally just solves the problem of the agent. And then how you interact with it is just through regular primitives of the platform. It's not reinventing the wheel where you have to like drop infrastructure. Something's going to break because they decided to do some like gRPC thing. You're like, no, we just send a message. So anyway, that was my long-winded response on like, I think that we're really uniquely suited in this space. I think compared to anyone, like even if you look at something like Go,
and
which
just
is
like to point
model.
out, like what you just described is like a complicated process to do in any other like
oh yeah, it's not easy. You have to solve all of that. To solve is not trivial, and it's going to be solved in different ways by different communities. And that you can already see JavaScript now where it's going to be like 12 different competing frameworks because they all have opinions about each individual part of this way to solve this one part of the stack, which for us, we just like
have
my favorite thing to say is
right?
like, yeah, what if we don't, what if we didn't even have to do that? So I love to say like, we don't solve the problem, we just remove the problem. This is a great example of that. Like this, routing to this piece of state that's held somewhere is solved for us such that we don't even think about it. We do a message send, and then like, do we think, well, how do we cache this piece of state of all this, of the chat and like expire that when the chat's over, so it's not held up in memory? Like, how do we solve that? Like, we don't even have to think about solving it, right? You would, of course, you would load it in some process state because that's how you write everything, right? You don't even, you're not even thinking of it in the term of, am I caching this in a Gen server, right? I don't have to hit the database. You're just, the way you would write it naturally treats that thing as this, this thing that gives you this free caching.
My like aha moment, when I first like figured out like how to dynamically create a Gen server, it was like mind blowing revelation for me. It was like
for folks that aren't familiar too, like once you Gen server is just a primitive around a process, which is just our unit of concurrency. In processes in Elixir, send and receive messages. They can be monitored. They can be linked. So if one dies, they all die. And the way that they hold state is they just recurse on themselves. So like Elixir is immutable, but the way a process like a Gen server or anything is like it's just calling back into itself and then waiting for messages. But the cool thing about that is we can put that anywhere on the cluster. So I think the subtext that I didn't mention is like being able to route anywhere, no matter on where the user happens to load balance to, is solved for us because that process that we start, that Gen server, when I build it on my laptop and just run it in Mixed Phoenix server, it works. But if it's running on a cluster of 12 servers, then sending a message is just transparently going to send across the cluster. So this is like what makes us so good at this is like the message send works location in a location transparent way. So you scale this thing up to 100 servers, it doesn't matter. You're going to do a message send and it's going to work.
I just wish I found Elixir sooner. You know, I just started writing it in like 2021. Yeah, but 2021.
Okay, so awesome. I didn't know your arc was so recent. That's awesome. Congrats on the podcast and everything you're doing.
Well, I kind of like, I had such a painful learning curve. I was like, there's not a lot of videos out there. There's not a lot of tutorials. I think we have great documentation, but I also when you're new to something, sometimes documentation is hard to kind of absorb.
Well, it's also new. Like I said, it's not just a functional language. It's
Right.
everything about it is. I mean, just like when I was coming from Ruby, just running like Phoenix server, the fact that that thing can use all my CPU cores and consume all system memory, like that's crazy to me. That's still crazy to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like normally in Node or Ruby, you have to like fork, you have to have threads that fork the whole app, like to use all the cores, of course, right? So I mean, there's just everything about every step is novel, and I think that does make it more frustrating to learn. And that's
Hmm.
also why I'm excited about LLMs, because someone can just
Yeah.
ask Cloud Code now, make me a Phoenix app.
It
It's
would have
it's
helped a lot because, like, it was my
yep.
first immutable language, my first functional language, because I came from like TypeScript and Swift and all those object-oriented things.
I felt
And
dumb when I learned it, like trying to do recursion. Like I was
oh,
doing
dude,
the prog book and like just trying to do like a simple recursive, um, just like comprehension, like basically like what enum reduce is doing. Just trying to write that example in the book, I was failing at it. And
pattern
I had like
matching blew my
yeah, I had a
mind.
computer science degree, so I remember thinking through the book like I'm done. I must just be dumb.
Yeah.
So I definitely have lived this knowledge gap experience where like I very well could have given up.
So,
It's
like,
non-trivial.
what's funny is I was building like a fitness marketplace workout app, right? This was my like bootstrapped idea, and I was like, I had a buddy in my ear. He's like, check out Elixir. Elixir's perfect. For like 2 years, I ignored him. It's like, dude, I don't have time. I don't have time. And then when I started to like plan this project, and I like understood the capabilities, so like I knew on paper Elixir was perfect for what I was doing, but I had no idea what that meant yet. So I just like started
Yep.
learning the syntax, and I started like I just wrote a REST API in Elixir, but I wrote everything wrong. Like I was writing it like I was a OOP developer, and
It probably was
using
still
all the
good.
old patterns, and I rewrote a lot, and it was just like a painful learning curve. So that's what kind of like I was like, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. And
I see.
teach what
To
teach
fill
what
the
I
gap.
learn, and that's kind of what happened with this. And then actually Michael Lubis is the reason that this podcast started. He was my first
Oh,
guest. Yeah.
okay. I didn't know. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think learning that way is really powerful because that's what when I first got into Elixir back when we had like an IRC channel, I would try to answer every question someone asked about Elixir. Often it'd be Erlang related. One, I wanted to be helpful and like help people fill that knowledge gap, but two, it was actually a great way to learn because like someone would ask a question that I wouldn't know the answer to, so I would go like find. It was like a double. It was like one, I could be altruistic. I'm helping this person, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
helping another human, but also I was self-serving myself because I was like, now I know this, right? So I think what you're doing with like basically learning while you're teaching by example of the things you learned is actually powerful because you have to go learn the thing, and especially to be able
Hmm.
to explain it, you have to like learn it thoroughly. So it's like a reinforcing process
The,
to go learn
and
something and then
like
be able to teach others.
I started like my first couple videos, my first playlist was like Elixir basics, right? So it forced me to dive deep into all these subjects because to teach you have to know something pretty good. So like forced me, like I was like in the docs, like okay, how can I explain like how like binary values work in Elixir? And I just based it just in the Elixir paradigm for how binary values might work. And I just kind of like stepped through everything that way. And it was super helpful for me to learn. So like it was kind of selfish, right? I put myself
Well, that's what I said.
out there. Yeah.
It's both. It's
Yeah.
self-serving and altruistic. You get to play both sides. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. And then it also got me like pretty like well known in the Elixir community for me to get an Elixir job, for me to do lots of things. So like it's yeah, it just works both
Yeah,
ways, I suppose.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I tell folks like putting yourself out there is like way easier than people think. Like I wanted to do open source for a long time because the website that became a company that I built was like a gaming website. I was basically optimizing for like Google AdSense ads for eyeballs, right? So I didn't feel like I was like positively contributing anything to society. So I wanted to always get into open source because when I was using like Ruby on Rails, was all open source, and I love the idea, and I like programming and tinkering. But I always felt like I wasn't like allowed to, right? Like I felt like I needed like some
Hmm.
permission or something. I don't know, like
Dude,
like
isn't that a
imposter
weird
syndrome.
feeling? Like,
Yeah, so like actually if you can search back Twitter far enough, you'll find that like I tweeted out something like 2011, or like, I had released an open source. Oh no, I redid my blog. I said expect a lot more out of me this year. And I said that publicly, so I like maybe it would like actually force me to like do
yeah.
something. And it wasn't until like a full year later that I released my first open source library, because I still didn't feel worthy. But the funny thing is, like the moment I put myself out there, like stuff just started happening, right? Like I
Hmm.
gave my first conference talk, in, an Erlang conference, and Dave Thomas was there, and it was on metaprogramming Elixir, and he's like, "You want to write a book about that?" And that's how the book started. So it's kind of
That's
similar,
awesome. Yeah.
probably to your arc, where like it just turns out like, I mean, it makes sense in retrospect, but like you just like start doing stuff and putting yourself
Yeah,
out
you don't
there,
need permission
and
from
then like
anyone.
no, you don't, and stuff starts happening, and like
Yeah.
and it's like worst case scenario, you've learned something, but also like as far as like having established credibility for yourself for a future job, like there's just so many things there that it just turns out, yeah, dude, don't need permission, and like no one has it all figured out. That's what I've learned. Like I
Yeah.
used
You know
to,
what's funny too? I've never been a guest on a podcast.
wow, you gotta change that.
But I've only like I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast and I just did it, you know?
Yeah,
And
well, that's exactly, yeah. And you didn't need permission to do it,
and the
and
greatest part
that's the
about
goal.
this podcast is like, okay, I know this isn't gonna be news to anyone. I think programmers are like very known for being lazy, right? They solve problems so they don't have to do something over and over again, right? I'm incredibly lazy with staying up to date on anything in tech, like, because things change. And like now, even with me just focusing in the Elixir world, yes, it's slower, it's easier to see what's coming, but it's still like, it's like a thing I procrastinate on. I'm very lazy. All I
Oh
do
yeah,
now,
lifelong procrastinator here, representing.
yeah, all I do now is like, oh, someone's building something cool. I'm going to bring them on my podcast and they're going to teach me live.
There
And
you go.
so now I just like, my learning curve is just inviting people on the podcast.
Yep.
So it
But
works.
no, yeah, I've struggled with imposter syndrome all along the way. But the only thing I'll say is like it's weird to like you see people in a community of any type. Applies outside of programming, but like I used to look at authority figures thinking like, oh, they have it all figured out, right? Like you go to a conference, you're like this person on stage, they I only had it all figured out like they do, and you find yourself on stage, and then if you realize people are looking at you the same way that like you an authority figure, and then at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm like, well, I'm just winging it up here, right? Like I'm doing the best I can.
Chris, you're the
So
cool guy. You,
but it's made me incredibly suspect of anyone that's like overly confident or claims
yeah.
extreme positions, right? Because you're like, no, it's like if this is taught me anything, it's like, no, I'm doing the best I can at the
Well,
time.
what's funny is,
I think there is something about what you're saying though, like you stumble through and you gap fill enough, and you do that 10,000 times. I do think that's how you become an expert. So I don't want to like
yeah,
undersell people that are on stage or like my own, efforts. But I do think like it is just a remarkable experience where you're like, no one has it all figured out. Like these folks are,
no.
whether it's a
Well,
framework creator or language creator or anyone in society, like they're doing the best they can. Like why was a decision made? It wasn't some like
yeah,
incredible insight. It was probably at the time I decided in my editor to name a Phoenix function that way. I put some
yeah.
thought into it, but it was just kind of like that's what it was, right? It wasn't this like novel insight every step of the way. It was just
Well, and what's
how it
wild
happened.
is like, look, you and I were both developers, but if you look at like our expertise and where we came from, we probably had very different like paths and like what we're good at, what we're not good at. And like Collects, the company I work for, the back end Elixir team, they're such smart guys that I work with. And I learn things daily, but we all have such vastly different knowledge bases, but we're all like, experts, however you want to call it. But we all know such different things. And it's like, it's wild when you start piecing people together from like very
Yeah, I
different
mean, well,
backgrounds.
yeah, tech is like there's basically an infinite amount of things to know. Like there's
Yeah.
like I said in my talk, there's a level of magic beneath all programmers' understanding at some point, right? So it's like even if you're a kernel developer, like at some point it becomes electrons moving through a CPU, and then it's physics. and that's
Yeah.
probably magic. Unless you're a kernel programmer and a physicist, quantum physicist, then okay, maybe those folks haven't figured out. But I think the overlap there is probably a sample size of one.
Yeah, I know where my skill levels kind of end, you know, like I can't go too deep. Like I can use my tools well. I can be effective. I can like understand a lot of things, but I also know I'm not, you know,
Yeah, that's me. I
going
like
too
to
deep.
again going back to this lazy point. Like I don't even know if it's lazy, but like I go as deep as necessary to solve a problem such that I
Yeah.
can shed the knowledge of how I did that because the abstraction solves it for me. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
networking layer, I don't know how networking works. I mean, it's like I know
Same.
like, IP protocol, like I could say some words and give you a vague
Yeah.
description, but like that's
TCP,
magic.
UDP,
Yeah,
and it
that's
ends
magic to me. There's
right.
like
Yeah.
whatever the, like the sin like yeah, anyway, like
Probably some
TCP just
packets or I don't know.
right. So I can name some words, but like at the plug, I mean, so as a framework creator, it's just a good example. Like I know HTTP vaguely. If you ask me like about the HTTP spec, I could probably tell you very little, right? So
Yeah.
like the Bandit
Same.
creator,
I'm the
the
same way.
Cowboy creator, they've done the hard work of the HTTP protocol, which HTTP 1 at least was simpler. HTTP 2 now is like who the hell knows? I'm not diving into that, but
Yeah.
for me, it's like anytime I have to dive deep, it's like just to solve that problem in order to not have to
Yeah.
dive deep again.
Well, and I
And that's great.
love like one of my like Ecto. I'm so grateful for the Ecto library, right? Because I I hack my way through. Like if I have to build a query manually, like I'm not doing it well. Like I can build a
Yep.
query, but not well. So like
Ecto
when
is incredible. Ecto doesn't get
yeah,
enough love.
I
I
know.
think Jose had some really great instincts there because like my very first Elixir library was called Atlas, which is still on GitHub somewhere. Terrible. It was basically a reimplementation of Active Record
Okay.
inspired database library. And Jose was working on Ecto at the time. So this is like way early, right? Pre 1.0. But I needed a web framework and I needed a database library to write my applications in. So I was trying to do both. And Atlas is terrible, but basically, Jose was like, "Hey, you should read. Like, here's a book you should read." Right. So like, his like the amazing touch point when I first started interacting with him was not like he was telling me I was wrong. It was like, "Oh, like I'm working on this library called Ecto." He's like recommended a book that I could read to like some ideas on what Ecto was using, basically like the repo pattern. So it was not like, hey, here's everything that's wrong with what you're doing. It was like, oh, here's what I'm doing, and if you're interested, maybe read this book. And it's just I thought what a very interesting way to interact than tell me I was wrong. And
I
I read the
think
book and I
that
was like, you're totally right.
that
And he actually did
approach
borrow. He borrowed something from Atlas too. This is like I was using records at the time. This is pre-maps, so it was using records.
okay,
So it was like
records, yeah.
one, he both looked at what I was doing and like found something to compliment and actually like got insight from the terrible thing that I made. And he's really good at looking at bad things and like what can we actually
Making
get
it
out of this
better.
that's good, whether it's negative interaction or bad code. And he also interacted with me in a way that was like positive and actually helped level me up to the point. Um, so that's just a sidebar
That's
on
really
Ecto, but no,
cool.
Ecto is really
I
excellent.
I think like that kind of interaction too is kind of has trickled down through everyone in the Elixir community because I feel like there's a lot less. Like I used to be guilty of this, like when like toxic startup world, you just like you're really blunt, you're rude in PRs or like what is this garbage code? And like as I've aged, I don't do stuff like that because
Yeah,
now
no, I mean
everything
I think
it's a
we
learning
try to be nice and
opportunity, you know?
you want to work with like the community, like it's a group of humans, and you want those people to
Yes.
be people you want to be around. And I used to be like, I tried to be a message multiplier in that regard, like just be a good example. But I'm less around than I used to be. I used to be, like I said, I used to have to try to answer everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I don't have time to do that. But I'm less active than I would like to be, like in the forum and on Slack. But I'm still there. But yeah,
Yeah.
but fortunately, we built up enough people with similar mindsets and kind of like these established norms, like don't be an asshole, that people are very good about
Right.
self-policing and just knowing,
It's
reading
just
the
like
room.
we've all been there and like do you want to learn from it or just like make someone feel like garbage? Like you want
Yep.
to teach them, like build people up because there's also like I don't know a lot of stuff too and I'd much rather someone just like teach me than be a dick, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
Like, I'm currently starting to record an Ash framework video, and I'm always like, when I'm learning something new, I'm probably harder on myself because I want to make sure I'm doing everything that the Ash way instead of like taking a shortcut and doing it also the Elixir way, or like not completely relying on the DSL or like magic scripts that are available with Ash. So like I get it. And I've asked Zach some really dumb questions, and he's just always like super nice and answers.
Yeah, well, yeah, Zach is everywhere.
Dude,
I
he's
think he said
insane.
he's got to scale back a bit too.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's very active. Yeah, his the level of code that he puts out, and also how active he is on the various
Yeah.
spaces is pretty impressive.
Yeah, dude's a wild man, and it sounds like he got a pretty sweet new gig, and he's trying
Yep.
to step back and not be the face of Ash anymore. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find a balance point. So,
Yeah,
like I tell folks, I love that. Yeah, he was able to find this path to like a sustainable open source project. It's not easy, and Ash is a big project, and
yeah,
I mean, probably way bigger than Phoenix at this point. Um, so yeah, the fact that he's able to find this avenue to basically get support to work on this, but also like you have to find in your own personal um, balance point too, because like once you cross that chasm of like open source, like hey, I'm kind of extracting a paycheck from this in some part, then you still have to like now you feel obligated, and so there's a lot to manage there,
yeah.
but it sounds like he's heading towards the path of being sustainable on both sides.
How did you handle that? I'm sure there was like a transition for you where you
I
were a
handled it
lot more.
from my wife went to medical school,
Oh,
which
okay.
was I mean like years of so medical school is like what 3 years and then or 4 years and then 3 years of residency after that. So there was like several years there where I had a lot of free time. So I was coding all day at work, coding all day at home, and not like sacrificing anything for that. Right?
Hmm.
The hours are pretty grueling in med school residency. So from that, I mean but that still turned unsustainable to me because I got like RSI in my wrists, and it's just like I can't. And it's funny, like physically sitting at a desk and typing all day at work and then at home was too much for my body. But
I think sitting
anything,
at a
everything
desk
can,
is the most unhealthy thing we can do to
yeah,
ourselves.
right. So I did have to find like an avenue there of, and then like IRC constantly. There was at one point I used to have like a chime anytime someone mentioned Phoenix, and my wife was like, like you can't. You're not going to be able to do this forever. Like it just was a lot, right?
I
So
used to
I
do
was
that
able
for
to.
YouTube subscribers.
Oh yeah.
Like you
Well, yeah.
like
I mean, and then
you
it got to a
obsess
point where
over it.
you were like you've made it, and you got
Yeah,
to turn it
yeah.
off. But no, so I was able to do it by. I mean, I was in a fortunate position where I had the time to invest, and also I was able to quit my job. Um, so I consulted with a company called Little Lines on Ruby on Rails, and like they were excited about Phoenix, and but I was doing it all on my own time. And at that point, like I really couldn't balance both, and I had the privilege to basically be able to like be unemployed for a few months to finish Phoenix 1.0. So the way I navigated that was like one, being in a position where I had the time and could also just take off and not get a paycheck for a few months and not go homeless. And I got Phoenix 1.0 out the door, and that's where I joined Dockyard then. And as a
Oh,
privileged
nice.
developer, I basically was like, my wife being in the medical world, like it blows her mind, but like my job hunt consisted of tweeting that, hey, I'd like to work some, I'm unemployed for a few months. Phoenix 1.0 is out. Like, I'd like to work somewhere. And like, that was like the way I did my job hunt. But yeah, I was privileged to find a company to pay me to work on Phoenix. And that's where I worked with Dockyard for 6 years. They paid for like 80% of my time, or was it 90%? Basically, it doesn't matter. The vast majority of my time, I was able to just devote to the framework, get a
Yeah,
paycheck
that's
for it
awesome.
for 6 years. So yeah, a huge debt of gratitude for Dockyard for doing that.
Yeah,
But yeah,
Brian,
it's not an
I
easy.
love Brian. Brian's a good dude.
Yeah, it's not an easy arc to navigate that in between time of like you feel like you're obligated. Like this thing that you created, usually it's like a passion project, becomes like entity in and of itself takes on a life of its own, and you have real users, and it's exciting. But then you're like, holy shit, I have to like, this feature's broken, I gotta fix it. People are relying on it, right? So you have this like personal quandary to navigate, and then it becomes clear that like maybe I can make this work financially, but then trying to navigate that is not easy. So anyone that can do that, like myself or Zach, is like huge props to them. And I'm also excited that Elixir has gotten to a size where like we have multiple folks in the community, living that life. I think it speaks well to the size of the community at this point. I know folks would love if we grew faster, but I think it speaks to a healthy community that we have folks that are providing enough value to other companies that they're also actually deriving a paycheck then from the open source.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, look how many careers exist from Elixir, which I guess Erlang, really? Right? Wild.
Yeah, it really is wild.
I'm a year older than Erlang.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was pretty much born the same time I was, which is kind of cool.
So what year was it? It was in the 80s, but
it was 86, I think.
86. Okay, yeah, represent. My birthday's in December, so we're the same age.
Yeah, so I was 85, and I feel like it was just like meant to be, right? I fell into Elixir, and
yes, it is. But like, part of me is like, man, I wish like I had found Erlang, because it was around in the 2003, right? Like
it was around during all of our.
It was there.
I quit. I quit trying to be a software developer because of frickin' Java. Yep. And then I got wrapped back into it because I wanted the ability to be a remote worker, and that's kind of why I got back into software.
Yeah, Erlang could have owned the world like the Web 2.0 era, even before WebSockets. So like long pulling with Erlang and like this distributed agent actor thing with Gen servers, like they could imagine like the JavaScript arc. I mean, JavaScript makes sense because it runs on the client, but if you imagine where like Erlang took off around the same time like Rails took off, like just what it would have been able to do at the time. Like even before WebSockets existed, you could have had something like Phoenix channels. Anyway, it's it would have been alternate history there. Alternate history there where it would have been dark sorcery for anyone else in the world, but they're still here though. So thank goodness they're here.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Like I have not yet. I mean, I definitely drink the Kool-Aid, but there's not really a use case where I don't see Elixir being a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's largely true. I mean, like CLI apps is like one thing people point to, Go portable binary, but I haven't played with it yet. There's a library in the community that's supposed to also package it up into a binary. I didn't play with. But other than like CLI
I know what you're
apps,
talking about. What is it called? I want to look now.
Is it like taco or burrito maybe? Something related, food related.
Let's see.
But no, by and large, everything that I care about building, I can do in Elixir, which is also remarkable compared to most ecosystems.
I don't know. Maybe it's not. Oh, I was thinking of the desktop, No,
I mean, there's also crazy shit that we can do. Like people are running. You can take Beam or all of Erlang in a LiveView app and actually run it on an iOS app. So like there's LiveView native, which is super cool, but there's also, I'm talking like people are just taking their whole Elixir app and putting it, they can put it on an iOS app, package it up, and boot the app locally.
Oh, wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
cool. At
ElixirConf,
they didn't give a talk, but they demoed it for me. There's actually 3 apps in the App Store that they are aware of that are doing this.
Do you know who that is? Like their name?
Garth, I can put you in contact.
I'd like to.
I forget the app names, but there are 3 apps that are doing this, and that Apple approves it because it's not something that updates. So it's just the binary. But the app landing on the client is self-contained, so it's not like it's
That's
changing.
cool. But yeah, I'd love to talk
VM.
to someone bring them on the podcast. That would be fun. Yeah, that's wild. I love that. Yeah. I mean, we can probably wrap this up. I think we covered quite a bit.
Wide range. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. And it was awesome meeting you. Maybe one day we'll meet in person. And
Chicago or Malaga, Spain. is Elixir
Okay.
EU. So I'll be
So
out
there's
there
a good
most likely.
excuse to go to Spain. So
Yeah.
all right, cool. Yeah,
Anytime you should
awesome, man.
come
It
out.
was great talking to you. And
Yeah, same. You should. I don't know when the CFP is that open for EU. Anyway, give a talk. I mean, you could visit, but also give a talk.
I could do a
Get on
talk.
stage.
The only time I've ever talked in person was a local Elixir meetup here, but I
Well,
could.
that's all it. I mean, now it's just that, but there are more people in front of you. But no, I mean, you can get
Yeah,
on camera and just and talk. So
yeah,
a
there we go.
conference talk would be it's work, but you'd be good at it.
It's not bad. It's the same thing. It would be fun. Good way to get a conference ticket paid for, right?
That's true. Absolutely.
All right, cool. Well, guys, for everyone that tuned in, thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys. And yeah, Chris, awesome meeting you. Good conversation.
Likewise.
And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me on.
Testing.
Hey, I'm Kimberly with Elixir Mentor. Jacob recently added recruitment services to help companies hire pre-vetted Elixir devs. I help with company outreach, so if you're hiring, I may be reaching out, or you can connect with us anytime at elixirmentor.com.